Hi everyone, in today's tactics video I'm going to give my performance at a 5-game tournament at Factroum in Warminster UK as run by Deployment Zone Television as led by Liam Dempsey. Had a fantastic time meeting some top blokes, including a subscriber to the channel and also playing some brilliant games. My army list is a battalion detachment with gunnery experts and spotter detail, starting with 4 command points. I had Inquisitor Courtiers with Smite, Castigation, which is a more complicated Smite, and Warding Incarnation, which gives an infantry unit a 5+ invul save. The 3 headquarter units are 3 tank commanders, 1 with Demolisher Cannon, Heavy Bolter and Twin Flamers, 1 with Weapon Expert on the Battle Cannon, Las Cannon and 2 Plasma Cannons, and the last with Slow and Purposeful to reroll 1s to wound if moving under halfway, equipped also with Las Cannon and then multi-melters. Troops were of course 6 infantry squads with a combination of bolters, bolt pistols, plasmas, melters, autocannons and missile launchers, which really were what I had lying around, not specifically building anything more. Elites were 2 platoon commanders with a power sword chap and mohawk as my warlord, 3 command squads, 2 with banners and 1 with a single mortar. Heavy support is 2 standard Lehman Russ battle tanks with demolishers, with bolter and heavy flamers, and then 2 chimeras with trim flamers, and of course my 2 favourite Hades breaching drills. So my army gives away the full 15 victory points to bring it down, and likewise 15 for assassinate, with about 8 or so for no prisoners. So overall a list that leans into boots on the ground and inflexible command, with mortar wound output and also some melee ability from the breaching drills. So the first game was into a Raven Wing army with a Chaplain on bike, Apothecary on bike and 2 other characters, along with 2 Incursor squads, 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, 2 Landspeeder Vengeance, 2 squads of Black Knights on bikes with twin plasma guns, and an aircraft called a Black Talon which does mortal wounds. I went with boots on the ground, inflexible, and retrieve Nephilim data, whilst my opponent went with raised banners, bring it down, and death on the wind, which rewards points when the motorbikes and land speeders kill units. My opponent got first turn and I felt the full effect of an Alpha Strike. Turns out my opponent was the 3rd best Dark Angels player in the world, and his shooting output was completely optimized, wiping out almost 500 points in turn 1. I tried to stay focused and positive and secure the top left objective to at least score 8 points on the primary in the mission Death and Zeal. I did manage to knock out an Incursor squad off the objective by advancing an infantry squad onto it, out obsecking them, but the following turn they were murdered by the Black Knights on bikes. With 2 Russes gone from turn 1, I simply couldn't do enough damage, as the bikes carry a 5+ invul save and the Apothecary kept them in the fight. I did manage to knock out a bit of his army, but ultimately the combination of the bike's speed and his all-round plasma damage kept me off the objectives. Final scores were 97 to him and a terrible 58 to me, scoring just 21 on primary, 8 on retrieve Nephilim data, 7 on boots on the ground and 12 on inflexible command. Game 2 was into Black Templars with a Captain, Chaplain, 2 10-man assault intercessors, an intercessor squad, 1 Blade Guard veteran squad, an Apothecary, an interceptor squad, 3 invader ATVs with multi-melters, an outrider squad and a single repulsor. My opponent took Grind Them Down, Bring Them Down, and the Black Templar secondary Allow Not the Worship of Infidels, which rewards 2 victory points when you take an objective off your opponent. I took the same secondaries as the first game. The mission was secure missing artifacts, with my opponent getting first turn again. He pushed up the repulsor with Blade Guard vets and accompanying characters, almost touching the top left objective, which was my priority target. Turn 1 he failed to destroy any of my armour, and then I slowly started to destroy all of his army. Initially he did outscore me on the primary, with turns 2 and 3 scoring 12 to him and 4 to me, with turns 4, 4 to him and 8 to me, and turn 5 where he scored 0 and I scored 12. The map and terrain layout gave me really good fire lanes for Lehman Russ to blast away, and had a sneaky play that helped me secure the centre objective. We had 10 assault intercessors. I moved up a demolished Leman Russ, doing a bit of damage in the shooting phase before charging it into melee, and hence locking up the 10 Marines. I knew they wouldn't be able to destroy it for a long time, given their chainswords are only strength 4. Ended up surviving the entire game, and I got back the objective by advancing an infantry squad that stayed out of engagement range and had more OPSEC units on the objective. I pulled the win with 40 on the primary, 15 on boots, 15 on inflexible, and 8 on retrieve Nephilim data. My opponent scored 34 on the primary, 2 on allow not the worship, 6 on bring it down, and only 3 on grind them down, for a total of 56 to 87 to me. Game 3 was into word bearers, with my opponent having 2 Masters of Possession, a Sorcerer, 2 squads of Cultists, 2 Legionnaire squads, a squad of Terminators, Master of Executions, 2 squads of Plague Marines, 10 Possessed, and 2x2 Obliterators, and also a Rhino. My opponent got first turn yet again. On the mission conversion, we're taking the same secondaries as before. And my opponent took Psychic Interrogation, Engage all fronts, and Bring it down. I deployed a fair way back, given the threat of a turn 1 charge was real, given the Possessed have got a 9-inch move. Needing a 10-inch charge, my opponent actually made the Possessed into one of my Chromeers and tagged one of my Leman Russes. His Obliterators did a little bit of work, doing damage to one of my Leman Russes, and in my turn 1, I then fired basically my entire army into the 10 Possessed, which had toughness 5, 3 wounds, and a 5+ invul save, and further boost with a -1 to wound took a lot to finish them off. With them gone, my Russes then did a lot of work whittling down his army. The early pressure of the turn 1 charge did, however, keep me off a centre objective, which means I was outscored in turns 2, 3, and 4 before scoring 12 in turn 5. The Inquisitor Cotiers proved his worth, twice denying my opponent Psychic Interrogation, and final scores on the board were 80 to my opponent and 78 to me. It was a fantastic game with both of us thoroughly enjoying ourselves. I scored 13 on boots, 15 on inflexible, 8 on retrieve Nephilim data, and 32 on the primary. My opponent scoring 44 on the primary, 9 on our mental interrogation, 10 on engage all fronts, and 7 on bring it down. I can pick the exact moment I lost the game on one of my outlying objectives, which had 2 Terminators on it. I had a Crimea, Hades Breach and Drill, and a Leman Russ battle tank that I charged to tie them up. I also had a command squad, also having way more units. In my next turn, I then took off the command squad to get a banner in the centre of the board, only for the Leman Russ to be destroyed when my opponent fought back in the melee phase. This left only 2 of my models to his 2 Terminators, which hence the objective was contested. If I had left the command squad on it, I would have scored 8 in turn 4 and would have won the game. Annoying to know a small thing like that prevented me from winning, but great that I can identify directly where the loss occurred. It's all about learning. So from that I went into Death Guard with a Lord of Contagion, 2 Plague Casters, 2 squads of Plague Marines, 2 squads of Blight Lord Terminators, 2 squads of Death Shroud Terminators, a Foul Blightspawn, a Plague Surgeon, and a Bloat Drone, plus 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. Here I went with boots on the ground, inflexible, and raised banners. On the mission, die to scry salvage. Whilst my opponent went for behind enemy lines, spread the sickness, and fleeing vectors, with them rewarding points for doing an action on an objective and also killing models with plague weapons. I finally got first turn, but managed to do little damage to only a Plague Burst Crawler, given I've got no artillery, and the terrain layout allowed my opponent to hide all his units in cover. He deployed aggressively at the top extremity of his deployment zone, which meant he was able to threaten these 2 objectives early on, with me probably not fortifying this part of the map with enough units. I struggled to kill off his units thanks to Disgusting and Resilient and Armour of Contempt, with his Terminators absorbing a boatload of punishment. He also got off a ton of mortal wounds from Curse as a Leper, decimating an infantry squad with mortal wounds. But having read up on this spell, the target unit has to be visible to the Psyker, which they weren't. But ultimately, I simply couldn't hold my primary objectives. I got spanked 60 to 97 with just 19 on the primary, 8 on raised banners, 10 on boots, and 13 on inflexible command. So from that defeat, game 5 was against Death Guard again, with a Lord of Contagion, Plaguecaster, a Plague Marine squad, 2 Poxwalker squads, a massive 10-man Blightlord Tornado squad, 2 Dreadnoughts, 3 Death Shroud Terminators, a Tallyman, 2 multi-mortar equipped Malefic Blight Haulers, and 2 Plague Burst Crawlers. I took boots, inflexible, and raised banners again, whilst my opponent took assassinate, grind them down, and spread the sickness. In the mission, Tide of Conversion. I got first turn again, and managed to kill off one of the Blight Haulers and part damage a Dreadnought and Plague Burst Crawler. I solidified the 2 objectives in the centre with about 6 units, having learnt from my previous 2 games. The nature of this map and terrain gave the Great Firelands for Leman Russes, where Armour of Contempt and a 2+ save really kept them around. The Crimeas did amazing work ploughing into a Dreadnought to lock it up, with another full of infantry being sliced open by the Lords of Contagion, only for 10 guardsmen to pile out and move them to my opponent's closest objective. Oddly, in this game compared to the other, I felt the slow nature of Death Guard really played into my favour, and I won 94 to 67, nearly maxing my primary and secondaries, with my opponent scoring 22 on primaries, 12 on assassinate, 12 on grind them down, and 11 on spread the sickness. So from these 5 games, my main takeaway is against optimized enemy army lists, Astra Militarum stands little chance. The Dark Angel list was clearly a finely tuned army list, and the first Death Guard list, also with multiple small units of Terminators and 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, was very optimal. I felt the Word Bearers list was a fair matchup, with clearly my tactical blunder on the outlying objective, but also my opponent's lucky 10-inch charge by the Possessed giving him the game. Against the less optimised Black Templars and 2nd Death Guard army, I was able to thin out their ranks pretty easily. The snapshot of this is that Guard still has a competitive edge despite being the only 8th edition codex out there. Against a non-optimised list, we can do good work, but as said, against well put together army lists, we have little answer. As to my lessons learnt, the loss of the objective against Word Bearers is a massive one. Plus also, I should have been way more aggressive with my Crimeas. In the first game against Death Guard, I could have advanced 2 of them up against the 2 walls of the terrain piece, where my opponent had forward deployed some Terminators and effectively move blocked them all. Also, I really missed not having any artillery, and I'm eyeing up 2 Basilisks again. The Russes worked well, and a previous list had 3 standard Russes with demo cannons and flamers, and did good work. I'm however torn between going all out and equipping everybody with multi-melters on the Russes, given 4 shots is decent, and AP -4 against 5 Armour of Contempt opponents would have been very handy. Also, Courtiers is a bit meh this time round. At 95 points, he didn't do enough work in my opinion, but critically, I didn't go into any units at the per wound cap phase like Gaz or one of the Satan of Necrons. As to the tank case slow and purposeful, on one of my tank commanders, it didn't do enough work. Hammer of the Emperor greatly reduces the amount of wounding rolls we're making, so 1s to wound don't come up all that often. So as to my placement of the tournament, I came a humble 26 of 38 players and scored best in faction, with the Patreon tank commander Glenn placing 28th, with me probably only just beating him, thanks to me going into the Dark Angels player who ended up placing 2nd in the tournament. Tournament scoring takes into account obviously your wins and losses, points scored, the order of your wins and losses, and also how your opponent performs in their games as well. But yep, hopefully you found that interesting, and let me know how you go in any tournaments you've played. Thanks for watching. Patreon Platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Mitchell, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Adal, Gilliam, the Colonel Merrill, Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Flint, Hills, Malek, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript England.